Hello?
Hi, Kittu. Can you hear us?
Yes, yes. Hi, Jan.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. Very good. I'll be on video in just a minute. I'm just setting my stuff up here. Okay, so please bear with me, but I figured I'd just call in and get started.
No problem. Thank you for joining us.
In case there are people waiting.
No worries. Meanwhile, I could take the time out maybe to introduce you and, feel free to chime in.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Jan, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, because your video froze for me for some reason.
No problem.
Just 1 minute. I'll be right there.
No problem.
You may need to allow me to start video, Jayant.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
It says...
Got it, yeah. Now you should be. You have co-host.
There we go, okay.
Perfect.
All right. Okay, sorry about this. Seems to be sun in the background, but should go away soon. Okay, all right.
So thank you so much for, taking an 8 a.m. session from the West Coast. Thank you so much for, replying to the email and really grateful that you're here. So allow me to, talk about the community we are building. So it's called Pixeltests. Since the time we met, I don't know if you remember, in Begumpet about 2.5 years ago. So now, right now, so Pixeltests is a community that's rapidly growing. It's primarily only 2 points, which is Web 3.0 or / blockchain upskilling that we have in partnership with IIT Madras. And the AI program is also going to be either with IIT Madras or one of the IITs. And I also thank all the members. It's 9:40-ish. Thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah, I know it is late for you folks out there, so my apologies for having you stay up this late.
No, that's completely fine. That's completely fine. And awesome. So without further ado, let me just introduce a very special guest, Swaroop, Kittu Kolluri. So I'll just try and go chronologically, and Kittu, just feel free to chime in or reintroduce if I've missed any part. I'll make my best attempt. So Kittu and me have a few things in common. He's also mechanical engineering from IIT Madras. Also operations research from Buffalo.
Only Buffalo.
But after that, I think the commonality sort of stops. And then he's been in Silicon Valley forever. with I guess, and he's currently a venture capitalist. He was previously with NEA. He's back, I guess. I know I was looking at your LinkedIn. Looks at least 40 companies. Probably the character limit in LinkedIn got on. and I remember you telling, I think it was Thai Talks or one of those talks, just when you were about to get into Neotribe, which is your own fund, and you backed. I love the caption that you have. I mean your thesis. Also, I don't know if you know Raghu Gulapalli, who's also a common friend, and he was in our previous startup. Audacious outliers. So without further ado, Kittu would love to know a little bit about your journey. And this is going to be the Fireside Chat series that we have is extremely sort of quasi casual. I do have one theme, which is Edtech, because I'm passionate about it and your views. But after that, it's going to be pretty much that. And second thing is this community, like I had written in the email, is predominantly, and more people are going to join in, is predominantly 35 to 40 years median age. Mostly, men, few women as well, working professionals from all parts of India, all, primarily with AI and blockchain in early stages of, upskilling. So 6-8 months. So that's pretty much it in terms of the audience. Over to you, Kittu. Would love to know your background.
Yeah, I like to say, and those of you that may have watched some of my other videos, say, my career has been a series of accidents. In the sense that I don't think I planned majorly for any particular outcome. As you said, I did mechanical engineering and then industrial engineering. And then my career started actually in between the time that I was, once I'd finished up my undergrad at IIT and I was waiting to come to the US, I ended up working for 3 months at a company called OMC Computers in India as a software engineer. And it was my first foray into software engineering. And I just loved it. And so when I came here for my IEOR major, I knew what I wanted to do. So I actually started to take heavily a lot of computer science courses and then essentially switched fields and came over to the West Coast, and I started to work. My first job was at Silicon Graphics, which is a 3D graphics company. And I worked there for about 6 years as a software engineer and then grew there. And from then, I co-founded my first company, which was Healthy on WebMD. So that was, again, my first entrepreneurial stint. That was about 5 years there. We took that company public. And then I left at the end of 2000, and I was advising a bunch of companies, and then co-founded and ran Neotribe, which was my second company. It was actually, it started off as danastreet.com. So there's these 4 guys who used to work for me back at Healthy On that had started it. And I'd worked with them to sort of pivot it into a different direction that took off. And so I joined and ran that company. And then that company got bought by NetScreen. And then within 2 months, the combined company got bought by Juniper Networks. And I ran the enterprise business at Juniper for a couple of years. And then my travel was getting too heavy. And my wife said, done these 2 things. And, you're the math science guy in the family. And you got to spend more time with, my son had just started to get to middle school. So I decided to leave, and I put out a press release. They put out a press release saying that I was leaving because I was a Section 16 officer. And I got approached by some venture firms saying, hey, would you like to come join us? And I was like, initially, why me? Because I know what I'm good at. This is a completely new field. But I spent about 2 months just educating myself about the space. And finally decided, this could be a fun thing to do, especially having a front row seat to the kind of innovation that's happening. In fact, that was the advice that I got from my partner, Mark Perry at NEA. He said, Kittu, what better place could you find your next startup if you wanted to go do another startup than be at a venture firm? So that's a great idea. So I joined NEA. But I liked that business so much because, in the sense that just the opportunity to be drinking from a fire hose essentially, and learn about so many different areas and interface with so many bright people. So I took on. And so what is it now? I'm to my 17th year as a venture capitalist, and but then I left NEA after 11 years there. And in fact, you folks should know that today is our 5th year birthday for
Wow.
Neotribe Ventures.
Wow.
So literally to the day, 5 years ago, I started Neotribe. And we're now kind of investing out of our second fund,
Yeah.
which is a $220 million fund. And so anyway, I'll pause there. And in terms of the number of companies I've been involved in now, it's actually over 100 between NEA and Neotribe, of course. But anyway.
So when I was getting the flyer out for this, I was like with my team, and then they were like, okay, let's look at all the companies he has. And then I hit like, show more experiences. It kept going.
It's because a lot of my entrepreneurs are like, they want me to advertise their company on my LinkedIn profile. So
no, makes sense. I think I saw that in a few more people. I want to say maybe Gokul's profile as well. But then you typically don't have like so many. And then so to be safe, we wrote over 30 companies to be statistically correct. So, I do want to be slightly like, I'm curious from a personal perspective. Talk about a little bit about the IITM experience. I mean, we were 2005 to 10 with all coaching ingredients. So I was like, I did nothing, to be honest. I barely made it to classes, etc. But I want to know, 82, 86, those are, I want to say, something special happened at those times. Were you like a good student? Were you involved in all the activities, quizzing, etc.? What was that a little bit before we get into
I was a decent student. I think, I was talking to my daughter about this, and I was saying, I probably didn't extract as much out of myself in terms of academic potential because, I'll tell you my personal stories. My father was a tiger dad of sorts, so growing up, he had some eye issues, so he had lost his vision. In fact, you mentioned Raghu Golapalli.
Yeah.
So Raghu's father, G.N. Rao Garu, he actually operated on my father.
Okay.
Way back in the early 80s, when my father had lost his vision, and here in Rochester, New York. And so G.N. Rao Garu and his wife had hosted my father. And then when they started Elvi Prasad Eye Institute, my father was one of the founding trustees of that institute. So I go back a long ways with that family too, a fantastic family. But he was basically at home, and he was basically supervising my brother and I. And my mother was a dance guru, and I had actually a lot of interest in music and dance. So even to this day, I sing. And my father was like, nothing's coming in the way of academics. And so, whatever I did in terms of music and dance was behind his back, so when I got to IIT, it was like freedom at last, that man is not here looking over my shoulder. But the pendulum kind of swung the other way. So I became light music coordinator, social secretary, general secretary of the hostel, this, that. I went overboard. And, and I tell my kids this. I said, when you go to college, you have your academics, you have your extracurriculars, you have your friends, and you have sleep. At any given time, you can probably do justice to 2, maybe 3. And otherwise something's going to suffer if you try to do all 4. So I was telling them, I tried to juggle all 4, and that didn't work out very well. So if I would say, I was a decent student, but I didn't uh, I left something in the tank.
Got it. Awesome. And then, so it seems like that's, so, I mean, I'll come to that question if, what are the music companies you've backed? And, that'll be interesting. Circling back to that phase, so seems like you worked a little bit in India before you went, and I like the way you said you were very clear on what to do in MS. So for instance, I was not clear. I mean, I'm just narrating my own experience, and probably a lot of my peer group, we just want to go to the US because of that MS thing, etc., which is, not definitely the optimal way. And it takes 5 more years to understand.
I mean, to be honest with you, that's basically what happened. Was I was like you in the sense that I knew I did not want to continue in mechanical engineering. I mean, this is honestly one of the things that I feel is a little flawed with the education system, not just in India, I'd say even here in the US, in a lot of public universities. Once you pick a particular discipline, right, you can't switch. You can't switch out of there that easily. Even a place like UC Berkeley, like once you join UC Berkeley and say, oh, I want to do mechanical engineering or physics, it's very hard to switch out of there. Okay, see, so I mean, I'm sure you guys seen this even in India, right? It's very hard to switch out of a particular discipline. And so I did mechanical engineering. I said, okay, I'm going to switch more to a business oriented thing, which is more IEOR. I mean, IEOR was in those days like a mini MBA of sorts, but I actually really enjoyed computer science. In fact, my son tells me this, Papa, he did an undergrad in CS, and he said, I like this, but I don't love it like you do. So, I mean, even to this day, there are times I will go and dabble and program and things like that. And in fact, I remember when Ishan was in college, he once calls me and he says, Papa, do you know how to do recursion in MIPS, which is, assembly language? I said, as a matter of fact, I do. Because I'd worked on compilers and debuggers back at SGI, and we had used MIPS. And so I gave him some hints on how to go about that. But anyway, but what I'm saying is, along the way, I just found my passions, so that's kind of how I've gone about it. There's a wonderful article written in the Atlantic about, so it talks about pursuit of happiness, and it talks about two paths. One path is sort of a stoic Epicurean path where you're very goal oriented and you're sacrificing everything, and the other path is called Epictetus path or something like that. It was basically kind of living in the moment and experiencing everything and just getting joy out of whatever you're doing at any given time. And so people choose one or the other. And this article says, maybe the right path is actually a combination of the two. And my life story has kind of been that. That is, there's been a part of my career where I've been sort of, I won't say goal-oriented or outcome-oriented, but have pursued, a more formalistic career. But another part where, I've pursued something or enjoyed something just because I'm living in the moment there. Like, for instance, you can't see it, but right behind me is a harmonium because I'm teaching myself how to play the harmonium, so there's no outcome there. It's just for my own sake.
That's insane. That's awesome. So people who are watching this on YouTube, etc., like that happy accident and this Epicurean blend of, probably a concoction of them both. That's more optimal path. Excellent. Actually, I mean, I do want to talk a little bit about myself. I actually liked OR when I was in Colombia. So I had very similar subset. I didn't like India right after graduation. The job sucked, pay sucked. I was like, okay, I'm going outside. And then New York City was the best. So I had the best of like party life plus operations research, deterministic models, stochastic models. They were taught by like the guy who wrote.
Colombia has got a very good IEOR program too.
Exactly. And you're right. Like who takes OR at least was like all the low grade guys, GPAs, but who order like a ticket to the US. And then I was blown away because CLRS, the book Clifford Steen, was the Steen that professor was teaching us. And you only need like probably one or two people to like take you out of that maybe a low phase per se. Yeah, that's amazing. But very eloquently stated again by that Atlantic article. Awesome. So now one of the things that's kind of one pattern I see, or maybe it's my lens, is people who've gone on to become like very fairly successful venture capitalists, etc. The bias could be like this strong foundation of engineering, or maybe who worked in like systems level design, maybe production, not production, but I guess the whole assembly line, etc., managing tech teams. And it seems like you've had that in abundance. Talk about that experience, because I've seen that common denominator across people who are able to think first principles.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And one thing that I've done in my career is this: I actually never ran away from the fact that I was an engineer first. Okay. And, that's the thing that I think if I were to think back to my life at IIT Madras, and I wouldn't be where I am without that degree. Mechanical engineering or electrical engineering is less the issue. What you basically learn from your undergrad, you learn how to teach yourself, and teach yourself fairly rigorous math science oriented subjects, and that's what I benefited from at Madras. And I never ran away from the fact that I was an engineer first, and I enjoyed being that engineer. And so even today as a venture capitalist, that's a huge advantage for me. And the fact that I did that mechanical engineering degree at Madras is a huge advantage for me, because when I look at a clean tech company, I'm reminded of a lot of the thermodynamics stuff that I did back then. Or if I'm looking at, a food and agri-tech, or robotics, when I'm looking at robotics things, same thing, where there's some kind of aerodynamics or fluid dynamics. Recently we invested in a company that is using ultrasound to 4D model the flow of blood in the arm, whether it be arm or leg. So for instance, when you are a person who has diabetes and is on dialysis, the arm is basically their heart. They've got the heart-lung machine that's purifying the dialysis machine that's purifying the blood, and they have to go in there. And so the arm is basically the heart. So, and this is modeling if there's any constrictions, any blockages, so that they can put stents and things like that into it, But when he was describing that, I was like, I'm glad I did my mechanical engineering degree. So yeah, as a VC here today, I leverage that a great deal. So we invest in what I like to describe as breakthrough technologies that stretch the imagination. So that's so a lot of our investments have to have a tech prerequisite, I also feel like for somebody who didn't grow up here, right? That is, I spent my first 21, 22 years in India. It is very hard to develop an intuitive feel for the consumer here, right? So it's very hard for you to go either build a consumer-oriented business or invest in a consumer-oriented business. Although I've done that, Robinhood was one of my investments. And so I did that, but most of my investments centered around some B2B technology.
That's interesting. I mean, having lived the next 20 years and with your congrats on your second fund, and you're still very focused on the B2B, but seems like you're deliberately not,
No, I also know how to, having built companies in that area, I know how to sell into that, and how to develop a efficient go-to-market strategy. So it's not just about, developing the technology. You need also an effective go-to-market strategy in terms of customer acquisition and things like that. And I've done a lot of that. So as a VC, it's not just about investing. It's actually helping your companies grow. And so we work very much in the 0 to 1, and then from sort of the 1 to 10 phase.
Awesome. And so it's very interesting in the thesis. And, when you say, I also looked at the site, and you have like this weather, I guess weather applied AI or forecasting. That's very
Climate AI. Yeah.
Climate AI, exactly. And so, weather tech, sorry, that's the word.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's very interesting in terms of a bet. I mean, I'm sure climate change, etc., is already, if not the next big thing. So I wanted to know about the deep tech piece. So when you do your diligence, do you have like a team of PhDs or postdocs who already build theses, and then once a couple of founders pitch, it fits snugly into your thesis, or it's the reverse, wherein you start doing the diligence, and then these guys seem promising. Let's actually now start doing some homework. How does that go about?
Yeah, there are some guys who might do thematic investing, and I've done a little bit of it, but I feel like it would be arrogant to claim that somehow we know more than the entrepreneur. The entrepreneurs have spent their life's work on creating this, and they're educating us on their work. And the only question I ask, and if I receive a aha response to it, that's when it piques my interest, which is, why now? And the reason I ask that question, and everyone should, if you're going out there to start a company, 2 questions you should ask yourself is, why now and why me? And the reason those questions are important is, a startup doesn't succeed till there is some kind of wind in your sails, right? You need some tectonic shift to blow that wind in your direction, right? To assist you, right? If you're going to try to build something by pushing that boulder up the hill, it's tough. You need to find a way of identifying some tectonic shift that will create an inexorable demand for your product. And your job is then to build a product and place yourself in the path of that inexorable demand.
So if I may just, spotlight on that 2 phrases, tectonic shift and inabsorbable demand. So how do you, what are the heuristics defining that? Is that the market wins? Like, I don't know, the crypto in India is just short. I'm sure you're following the last 2 years. Now NFTs are taking over the world. That's the crypto space. Now let's look at climate change. There's some sort of nice waves coming in there. Some waves are shorter, longer, and they're growing. So what are the mental models in your brain or your team's brain when you see those?
Yeah, I mean, look, there are some, I actually look for something that's non-obvious, right? The fact that there is climate change is obvious, right? But what's non-obvious is this, that is the models used the models used to model climate change today. And when I say climate change, we're talking medium to long-term climate, right? Not short-term climate, are terrible. Today, everyone's using simple moving averages. And simple moving averages is woefully inadequate. And so that's basically where we've come up, this company has come up with a way of saying, and it's actually brilliant what inspired them. It's actually computer vision that inspired the AI models that they came up with. And so they came up with a model of how to better predict, medium to long-term climate, particularly extreme events, the La Niñas and the El Niños that you run into. And why that matters, And in fact, this is all great. Okay. When I first met with them, I said, okay, fantastic technology, great. But who would care? Who cares about this? And so we actually went about looking to see which businesses cared. So, and that's one of the things that was the non-obvious insight is there are businesses today that are impacted by climate, both from an OPEX and CAPEX point of view, and are starting to figure out what they need to do about it. So agriculture is actually one of those areas where there's a huge impact, obviously. I mean, look, I'll give you an example. You know, I live in California, and the wine industry is a large industry here for us. The nut industry is also a large industry, like walnuts, almonds, things like that. But wine, let's take wine as an example. You know, there are wines today, like Pinot Noirs, that require a certain kind of climatic condition. That is, they need a certain number of what's called chill days. Okay, so chill days are the temperature needs to be within a particular range, right? And so those grapes need a certain number of chill days. They're not seeing that the number of those chill days is reducing in California. So they're going and moving their vineyards to Oregon to try and find those things, right? In fact, there's a business out of India, out of Ahmedabad. What's it called? Advant, I think it's called. That's actually signed up as a customer to Climate AI just recently. And they're in the agriculture space. They're actually multinational. They're also in Australia, but the main company is in India. So anyway, I'll pause there and say, so those are the things that you want to look for. Is you want to look around the corner and, you know, detect those macro trends as an entrepreneur, and where the world is not yet woken up to that, and you're right and they're wrong. And I say, why me is, okay, what is it that you bring to the table that uniquely qualifies you to solve that problem and provide you with the core competence to do that? That makes sense?
Yeah, that's actually, I could see, like, you know, sort of real excitement when you were actually narrating that. No, it's a very palpable because you excellent. So let's, you know.
Well, somebody noticed, I just tweeted last night about, you know, what happens when you drink a glass of wine every night. So my wife gives me a hard time. I keep telling her, red wine is really good for you.
Yeah, okay.
Anyway, keep going, Jen. Sorry.
Nothing like a VC at the top pushing the sales as well. So that's awesome. And now coming back to, like, just the you know, the ostentatiously the topic, which is Edtech. So what are your thoughts about Edtech? What's going wrong and right? You know, India first.
Edtech, when you say Edtech, you're talking about educational technology.
That's correct. Education technology. What's going wrong and what's going right in India / United States? You know, high level.
I mean, Edtech, I think I can speak about Edtech here. Which is, first of all, I think, you know, it is awesome that we today have avenues and resources to educate ourselves and you know, continuously keep educating ourselves and reinventing ourselves. I mean, it's just amazing what kind of resources there are. Like, for instance, you know, when I studied computer science way back when during my graduate program, AI was a bad word. So knowledge-based expert systems were a bad word. Like, people used to poo-poo on that. And fast forward now. And so there weren't a whole lot of courses available to go study that. But, you know, in fact, even game theory was considered to be shady kind of a thing. You know, I remember there was during the Reagan administration, I think there was this guy called Admiral Poindexter. And he had come up with this thing saying, hey, we should invest in a game theory-based approach to predict where the next terrorist attack might happen. And, you know, a lot of people criticize that, and, you know, you're playing with lives and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, but so why I'm giving you that is that I taught myself. I took, Andring's course on AI and machine learning. I learned game theory from just, I think, Coursera or edX. So I think if you have the will and the patience to go through it, it is just, it behooves you to go do that. However, the big problem with EdTech as a business is attrition. There are a lot of people who start a program, don't finish it. They start a particular course and don't finish it. I think that's the problem with EdTech. And the other issue, and some of that is kind of going away, is, how do you certify somebody, as having gone through a course, and how do you make sure that that certification is worth something, right? And this is where I think, when you think about the more formal part of education, the colleges and universities, they want to protect their brand, because it's an industry. Let me tell you, education is an industry in countries like the US, the UK, Australia. It is an industry, and they earn a lot of money from people like you and I coming here for our graduate programs or undergraduate programs. So, so those are, I think, some of the things that people haven't quite figured out.
Awesome. And the other thing is, did want to ask about the next question, which is, do you invest in India, cross-border, or if you're focused?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I did that a lot more when I was at NEA. I've done that a little lesser than here, although I did back IIT Madras founder, Prashant. We've done now investments out of India, Australia. There's about 10 or 12 cities all over the world that we've invested in. Now, that said, what's been hard for us about investing in India is the currency. The currency risk, that is, the exchange rate risk. When I was at NEA, we'd invested a lot, about $350 million into India, when the rupee was trading at 45 rupees to a dollar. And as you know, it's now, what is it, close to 75 rupees to a dollar. Yeah. And so that hurts you in terms of your return and your IRR and things like that.
Got it. Perfect. Yeah. Now coming back to that, just about the founders piece, because what are the, I mean, probably a cliched question, but every time I really like to listen. What are the top 3 things you want to look? What floors you? I know first meeting might not be enough, but the first 5-10 minutes you develop, your gut is right there. What are the top 3 things that you look for, and what are the red flags or seemingly okay for good green flags?
Yeah, I'd say, I mentioned, I look for the, I ask them the why now, and I look for, why that team is uniquely positioned to solve this problem. I also look for, the kind of conviction they have for it. And that conviction doesn't have to come from, somebody who is a good talker. It's just, you can assess the belief that they have. And that belief is born out of what they've taught themselves, what they've learned. And that intellectual curiosity is something I look for, and then, value system also matters. That is, look, this is going to be a marriage, and we don't need to agree on everything, but our value systems need to have a decent overlap. Those are things I kind of look for.
Awesome. Okay. And so just want to go back to, some of the AI focus that you have, because, a lot of community members are here. you talked about, the 4D arm modeling, and it seems like also the computer vision aspect is used in the weather company. What are some of the other 2, 3, broad, and you can redact?
We invested in a company called Third AI out of Rice University that is trying to build building a deep learning platform for that can leverage CPUs, general purpose CPUs, as opposed to GPUs, and can do so much faster than what a traditional GPU can do. So they're looking at anywhere from 10 to 15 times faster on Intel x86 versus NVIDIA's GPUs. So that's a company that's more of at an infrastructure layer that we invested in. I invested in a company out of two guys out of IT Kanpur called Nimble Edge. They're building a federated learning platform. So these are some of the things that I like the infrastructure part of it as opposed to just the application part of it, because that could also be game changing of sorts.
Okay, so 2 questions just as a follow up to that. One is, what are the false positives? I mean, you feel like, okay, these guys have it, etc., but then you back them, but after 1-2 years, I know you've told me value system again, specifics can be redacted, but on a high level, like true positives are easy to get, but false positives or the rest of the metrics like false negatives.
The thing I'll tell you, whenever an investment of mine has not worked out, a lot of times, one of the major factors that contributes to it is actually founder strife. Founders not getting along with each other. So basically, it's team risk rather than market risk or tech risk or whatever. Not always the case, but I found that, and it's hard for us in a small number of meetings to assess that team risk, because when you meet the team, they're on their best behavior and everyone's like, rah-rahing and high-fiving each other. But I've found that a lot of times our investments go south because they can't get along with each other. And then look, the journey of a startup is, especially in that 0 to 1 phase, is a pretty tough one, in the sense that discovering product market fit is non-trivial. In fact, I teach a course on this, or rather I give do a workshop on this, to some of our entrepreneurs on how to go about it. But that is non-trivial. And, the venture industry doesn't know how to help people get there. They basically say, okay, here's the money. And then, we'll track you on your operating plan. Well, that's just looking for outcomes. But how do you go about doing it? And, discovering product market fit is like, you have color blindness, and I give you a pair of glasses and suddenly that eliminates your color blindness. So it's sort of like discovering these patterns and then saying, that's where it is, kind of thing, So, I mean, I'll tell you my own story. When we were doing Neotribe, I mentioned to you, Neotribe actually started off as Dana Street. We built an anonymizer website, right? And we pivoted that into an SSL VPN appliance. So until that pivot happened, we didn't have a business. And once we had that pivot, it just took off.
Wow. So let's just take sort of seemingly the reciprocal question. Let's say, what happens when you back a bunch of founders, etc. You've seen, these guys, but you're like, they're okay, they're average at best, but yet we put in, but then suddenly it takes off. What are those who are those black swans, or like, so-called ugly ducklings? Like, what are the ingredients you've seen them?
I mean, look, at the end of the day, in the life of a startup, it is not a little bit about product market fit. It is all about product market fit. And so if you are able to build something that addresses an inexorable demand of sorts, then you have a winning hand, right? And so then it doesn't matter, how good so it's easier to build a great company with a mediocre team but a great market than with a great team and a mediocre market.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's just detecting that, and boom. I mean, you can see so many examples of people that have succeeded in building phenomenal businesses, and you say like, oh, how did they manage to do that? It's all about detecting that. And some people have, you got to give them credit for having the nose for that.
So guys listening to this, I mean, just comment great market all the time, trumps everything. Awesome.
Great market trumps everything.
Yeah. Awesome.
Cool.
Kittu, I do want to be cognizant of your time. How much more time what's your hard
stop?
I
can go a little past the top of the hour here. I got to get to our deal meeting, but I can spend a little more time.
Got it. Perfect. So
we got started a little late. So
that's fine. Okay.
We say 5 minutes past the hour.
Awesome. So we have about 15 minutes left. So I do have one question before maybe, we can get into the Q&A. Guys, meanwhile, just, type in the comment box your questions that you might have. Yeah, the one question that I did have was, what are your misses? Which again, specifics you could redact, but the misses.
Sorry, what were my misses?
Yeah, meaning like the regrets, any in terms of deals, etc. You passed on these.
Yeah, I passed on Pandora.
Okay.
I mean, that's one of those companies that I wish I had done, especially given my love for music. Let me see what else. I'm sure there are other deals where I had actually wanted to do it, but couldn't get there on price or whatever, and it kind of got away from me. I think Thousand Eyes was one of those companies. But I don't have any regrets. See, the thing is this, right? It's like no one deal. That's the wonderful thing about the venture business. No one deal is a make or break. At that rate, we'd have only a small number of winners and everyone else a loser. I mean, there are some companies that I've gotten into, like I'll give you an example of Climate Corporation, which started off as Weatherbill way back in 2006. Everyone else passed on it up and down Sandal Road. And I saw something in it, and I said, this is a very interesting stochastic model to predict that. They were predicting short-term weather. And I invested in it, and that company ended up getting bought by Monsanto for over $1 billion. All right. And then I invested in Robinhood, but again, everyone thought that it was not going to be a winning business. And there they had a great team. I mean, there were 2 Stanford guys who started the company, and still that wasn't enough to sway people. But I found something very unique, very disruptive with their business model of giving away transactions for free, essentially, zero commission stock trading. And here we are. So what I'm saying is that there are going to be ones that you win, as long as a VC, you have enough of those, where you're making your set of bets and they're working out well. And not everything is going to work out. And at that point of time, I tell my entrepreneurs, your time is more valuable than my money, right? And despite our best efforts, if things are not working out, let's go do something else. And large part, I'm investing in you because of you, so.
And probably for the benefit of the audience who's watching this on YouTube, LinkedIn, etc., what's your typical check size, like between starting point?
Typically about anywhere from, I'd say at the low end, we do 2.5, 3 million at the low end to as high as $6-7 million at the high end. Those are initial checks.
Got it. Perfect. Cool. So let's, if you're comfortable, let's take a few Q&As from
Sure.
Yeah. So we have one in the Q&A section of Zoom. Dejyoti Bhattacharya.
Okay, one second. Let me just pull that up. Hang on. Oh, there we go. Okay, how do you look at other tier 2 cities to join startup bandwagon or to fuel India's startup again? Oh, great question. I think that I actually think that the interesting things about sort of tier 2 cities in India is that cost of customer acquisition through more traditional channels is actually cheaper, whether that be television or even paper, newspaper, or flyers. It tends to be cheaper. And in fact, there's a company out of IIT Madras called Asset Plus, and they're building this mutual fund asset management platform. And a lot of their business is actually coming from tier 2 cities. People who want to invest into the stock market and are doing so through mutual funds. And they've basically created like a supermarket for mutual funds. And so I think it's eminently possible to create a successful business. I remember when I had invested in a company called ViewClip, that was a mobile video platform. And a lot of their business came out of India. They got bought by PCCW out of China, out of Hong Kong. But a lot of their business came out of India, and a lot of the traffic actually came out of tier 2 cities.
Wow, that's awesome. Cool. Let's just give a few minutes for people to chat.
I hope that was useful.
Guys, whoever has a question, just type it out on the chat. Okay, so we have
There's one more question on the chat. Is how big or novel is the idea of addressing workplace safety, general inspection through AI? Traditional biggies like IBM. Workplace safety, I haven't run into a whole lot. I mean, here in the US, workers' compensation is something that virtually every enterprise needs to pay for. Because if one of their workers runs into an issue, then and they are unable to work, then they have to pay for it, And so if there is a way to apply computer vision and AI to say, hey, somebody is doing something risky or can predict, an accident before it can happen, I'm sure a lot of businesses would care about that. So I think it's an interesting idea, Sandeep.
I had a quick question as members of the audience type out their questions. One of the things I get in my community is all of the folks extremely talented, have one natural outcome, which is the job, right? That's like the de facto like sunrises in the east kind of basic premise. But today, if you were to rewind back in time, and if you were like a 35-year-old, 38-year-old, you had access to all of this amazing content, teaching, you're learning on your own. How do you go about this dichotomy? Like there's peer pressure, etc., job, but there's also startup AI. You've backed so many companies, so on and so forth. Brilliant.
My advice generally would be this. Okay, again, there's no set formula. I said, your undergrad teaches you how to teach yourself, right? But now figure out what you want to teach yourself, right? I think that the global economy has become a bit of a specialist economy. So your undergraduate degree is the new high school degree, high school diploma, okay? And so you probably need a little bit of postgraduate education, whether you do it formally or informally, need some postgraduate education to develop some amount of expertise, knowledge in certain areas. And I actually think that working for a short period of time, whether that is 3 years, 5 years, whatever, so that you not only put that knowledge to work, but the other thing that I think you learn from that is how to work with others. When you are just in your educational program, you really don't know, because, during your education, you perceive everything as a zero-sum game. And life is not a zero-sum game. You have to learn how to work with others. And that's where your emotional intelligence starts to develop. And so I think it is more important. People with greater emotional intelligence are likely, it's a better predictor of their success rather than just native intelligence, native IQ. Okay.
Excellent. Let's look at just one more question.
Somebody in the chat. Mechanics by undergraduate move to fundamental science, material, my master's PhD in material science. IT kind of models that I use back when we continue, we've not worked on data and statistics. These models rely on framing question. Yeah. So, okay, this is interesting. What I'll say is that AI trumps physics. AI trumps pure science. I now have enough proof of that. And what I mean by that is that, I'll give you 2 examples. I have an investment in a company called Heliogen that just went public at the end of December. And what Heliogen does is it has built a closed loop computer vision based system. It's a solar concentration system to generate very high heat. And there have been attempts to do that previously, but it just hasn't worked, right? Because there is drift, there is error in the equations. And so if you try to model the movement of the sun mathematically, there is going to be some drift, in the error, and that'll make the entire system malfunction. What these guys did was they said, okay, we're not going to use any mathematical equation. We're just going to use 4 cameras. And so all 4 cameras are looking at a particular mirror. And if all 4 cameras if any one of the cameras can see the sun in the mirror, they'll adjust it. When all 4 cameras cannot see the sun, guess where that mirror is pointing? Right towards the center. And so that's basically what they would do. They'd keep doing these minor adjustments. And the company can reliably now do over 1600 degrees centigrade weather, temperature. Another company that we invested in is a company called IRA that is generating dynamic machine codes for wireless communication. And, their insight there was that any wireless channel over a short period of time, the SNR could be random, but over a longer period of time, the SNR is not random, right? And so they were using AI to model that and using feedback to model that. I mean, you can go sit and write equations to try and figure out how to do that, but with simple AI, they were able to trump that in an easy way.
Wow, that's that's some of the coolest stuff I've heard in a long time. Apart from YouTube videos, but this trumps a lot. And also to see it end to end, they having gone public is like remarkable with that kind of exciting technology. Brilliant. So we will have to like close now because I do want to be cognizant of your time. So thank you, Kittu, so much for all your for taking the time out again, coming and so.
Yeah, I would love to spend more time if your audience would like. I'll come back again. But sorry, I couldn't stay for longer. But I hope everyone found this useful, and has. I hope some of my comments may have had some impact with your audience.
Definitely, I think it's just sort of getting the gray matter now stirring up. Looking at some really amazing companies. Thank you so much again. Yeah, we could just have one session on basically maybe 20 companies you've just done. The cool stuff.
Yeah.
Each one has just done that.
Yeah, I mean, reach out to me. And whenever you feel like in a few weeks, few months, whatever, and I'm happy to come back again. Okay.
Sure. And by then, hopefully, our size is also bigger. And yeah, awesome. I'll let you get back to your meeting in Harmonium.
No, actually, I have an internal meeting. Okay, thank you very much, folks, for having me. And I really enjoyed this. Great questions, Jay. And your audience also asked some incredible questions. So thank you all. I'm sorry I couldn't get to everyone's questions, but we'll come back. Meanwhile, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn or something like that, and we'll connect there. Okay. Bye now.
Yeah. Can you drop because I'll continue my session?
Yeah, please.